If you think taking 1 year to live freely can't ruin anything important, this is what it feels like when the people you love start disappearing quietly, and you don't realize it's happening until there's no one left to call. Before we begin, I have a question for you. Where are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below. It's amazing to see how far our stories can reach. Now, join me as we begin this story. It wasn't always broken between us. That's the part people never believe later. My family wasn't perfect, but it was warm, loud sometimes, messy. But we showed up for each other. There were dinners where everyone talked at once, arguments that burned hot and faded fast, weekends that blurred together because we spent them in the same rooms. It wasn't always rosy, but we got along, and that mattered to me more than I admitted at the time. My sister and I had our own rhythm, some days close, some days distant, but never strangers. And my grandmother, she was my anchor, the one person who felt permanent in a world that kept changing. She called me at the same times, invited me to the same monthly lunch without fail, asked the same questions, and listened to the answers like they were new every time. So when I decided to pause my studies for a year, I didn't expect disaster. I expected concern, questions, but also trust. I remember telling them in the kitchen. The table was cluttered with papers, cups, half finished things. I stood while everyone else sat, shifting my weight from one foot to the other, hands tucked into the sleeves of my sweater. I said it calmly, almost casually. Just 1 year, just a pause, not quitting, not failing, just breathing. I told them I wanted to live a little before life turned serious forever, before routines hardened, before choices became permanent. They listened. Some nodded, some sighed. No one yelled, no one slammed a door. That's why it felt safe. What I didn't say out loud was how tight my chest felt every time I imagined going straight from school into responsibility. How small my life felt when I measured it only by grades and deadlines. I wasn't unhappy, but I was restless. I had enough for survival, enough for groceries, enough for rent, enough for school, which was already paid, but not enough for the life I was watching other people live. Trips, clothes that didn't feel like a compromise, spontaneous nights without checking my balance first. That desire sat heavy inside me. Not dramatic, persistent, it showed up in small moments. Standing in front of a mirror, tugging at an old jacket, thinking about how tired I was of pretending I didn't care. Scrolling through photos late at night, phone lighting up my face in the dark, my thumb moving automatically while my mind drifted. I didn't want luxury. I wanted intensity. I wanted stories. That's when OnlyFans entered my world. Not like a threat, not like a warning sign. It appeared as a solution. People talked about it casually. Online posts framed it as empowerment. Quick money, temporary, on your own terms. I told myself I was practical enough to handle it, that I was self aware enough to stop if it felt wrong. The first day I created the account, my hands were cold. I remember sitting on my bed back against the wall, phone in my lap, staring at the screen longer than necessary. I kept exhaling slowly like that might calm the tightness in my chest. This is just a tool, I told myself, just a means to an end. When I finally posted something, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck. My mouth was dry. My fingers moved too fast, like I was afraid I'd change my mind if I slowed down. Afterward, I sat there completely still, listening to the quiet of the room, waiting for regret. It didn't come. What came instead was relief. The first payment notification felt unreal. I checked it twice. Then again. Something inside me loosened. My shoulders dropped. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without counting every breath. It worked. Trips stopped feeling impossible. Clothes stopped feeling like a luxury. I stopped saying no to invitations because of money. I walked differently, straighter, faster. I felt grown. When people hinted that I should be careful, I smiled. Sometimes I joked. Sometimes I brushed it off with a shrug. They didn't understand the world I lived in. They didn't understand how controlled it was. I told myself I was smarter than the risks. And the dangerous part is that at first, I wasn't wrong. Nothing collapsed immediately. No one confronted me. No doors slammed shut. Life just kept moving. And so did I. At first, nothing looked wrong. That's the part that kept me calm. From the outside, my life seemed full. Suitcases by the door, photos from places I'd never been before, clothes hanging in my closet that still smelled new. I was busy, moving, going places. And because of that, it took me a long time to notice what was missing. It started with messages, not disappearing completely, just slowing down. A reply that used to come in minutes now came hours later, sometimes the next day, sometimes not at all. I remember sitting on my couch one evening, phone in my hand, thumb hovering over the screen. I reread the last message I had sent, trying to hear it the way someone else might hear it. Was it too much? Too casual? Too confident? My chest felt tight, like I'd missed a step on the stairs and my body was still catching up. I told myself people were busy, that adulthood looked like this, that friendships didn't need constant proof. But I checked anyway. I checked who watched my stories, who stopped liking posts, who muted me without saying goodbye. I hated myself a little for noticing, for caring. At night, sleep stopped coming easily. I'd lie on my back, staring at the ceiling, breathing shallow and uneven. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt in the morning. Sometimes my hands would shake slightly when I picked up my phone, even though nothing had happened yet. When I did see friends in person, the difference was subtle but unmistakable. Hugs felt shorter. Conversations stayed on the surface. No one asked questions that required real answers. I'd catch myself gripping the edge of a table or the strap of my bag, grounding myself because I suddenly felt exposed. Still, no one confronted me. That silence was confusing and strangely comforting. As long as no one said anything, I could pretend nothing was wrong. The money kept coming in. That part didn't slow down, but it started to feel different in my body. Every notification came with a flicker of tension. Every message from a stranger made my stomach drop before it settled again. I began locking my phone face down on the table, double checking doors, flinching slightly when it buzzed unexpectedly. I didn't connect these things at first. I told myself I was just tired. The first real fracture came at a family lunch. We were sitting around the table, plates warm, food untouched longer than usual because the conversation kept drifting. I noticed how often voices softened when I joined in, how eye contact broke just a little too quickly. The room felt smaller, hotter. I shifted in my chair, suddenly aware of my posture, the way my hands rested in my lap, the sound of my own voice. Later, one of my relatives pulled me aside. She spoke quietly, like she didn't want the walls to hear. She told me that photos had been shared, that people I knew had seen them, that my name had started circulating in conversations I wasn't part of. I felt the air leave my lungs all at once. My chest tightened so sharply I had to swallow to keep from coughing. I nodded, said very little. That night, I sat on my bed with the lights off, phone glowing against my palms. I scrolled, unread messages, conversations that ended mid-sentence, people who hadn't blocked me but had clearly stepped away. My fingers felt numb as I scrolled, like they weren't fully connected to me anymore. I tried to remind myself why I started. I tried to rehearse my reasons, but the words felt hollow. I noticed how still I'd become after posting, how I'd sit motionless, phone placed carefully on the table, staring at a single spot on the wall. The people who stayed close now weren't people who knew me, they knew an image, a version of me that didn't exist when the screen turned off. And the people who had known me before, they were the ones leaving quietly. I could feel it in my body before I fully understood it. The weight in my chest, the constant tension in my shoulders, the way silence started to feel louder than noise. Something fundamental had shifted, and I didn't know how to stop it anymore. The moment that finally forced me to stop pretending didn't arrive with noise. There was no confrontation, no dramatic message. It came the same way everything else had been coming lately: quiet. Every month, without exception, my grandmother invited us for lunch. Same day, same time, same table that had been in her apartment for as long as I could remember. It was never fancy. Soup that steamed slowly, plates warmed by habit, her hands moving carefully, deliberately, like the rhythm mattered. She never skipped a month. The first month she didn't invite me, I barely noticed. I told myself she was tired. That life happens. The second month, I noticed. I checked my phone more often than usual, not scrolling, just waiting. I kept it on the table while I cleaned, screen facing up, glancing at it every few minutes like it might light up if I looked away. It didn't, so I asked. I remember exactly where I was when her reply came in, standing in my kitchen, barefoot on the cold floor, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room. The light outside was already fading, that dull gray that makes everything feel unfinished. Her message was short, polite, carefully distant. She said she wasn't feeling well enough for company lately, that maybe we could do lunch another time. I read it once, then again. My chest felt heavy, like something pressing inward instead of outward. I leaned against the counter because my legs suddenly felt unreliable. She didn't accuse me. She didn't explain. And that was the worst part. Because for the first time in my life, she wasn't reaching for me. That night, I didn't distract myself. I didn't scroll. I didn't post. I sat on my bed with my back against the wall, knees pulled in, phone resting loosely in my hands. The screen was dark. I listened to the building around me. Footsteps above, a door closing somewhere down the hall, life continuing without me being part of it. That's when the truth finally settled in my body. I hadn't just lost friends. I hadn't just damaged my reputation. I had damaged trust, slowly, quietly, without ever stopping to look back. I thought about the warnings I laughed at, the conversations I dismissed, the way I smiled when people told me to be careful. My shoulders felt permanently tense. My stomach stayed tight, even when I wasn't anxious about anything specific. Sleep came shallow and restless, like my body didn't fully trust itself to let go. The next morning, I didn't reach for my phone right away. That alone felt unfamiliar. I made coffee, stood by the window, watched people walk past below, coats pulled tight, heads down, moving with purpose. And for the first time in months, I asked myself a question I had avoided since the beginning. Was this year actually giving me freedom? Or was it taking something I wouldn't be able to get back? The answer didn't come dramatically, it came calmly. I closed the account, no announcement, no explanation, no goodbye, just a few taps, a confirmation screen, then silence. The silence felt uncomfortable at first, like stepping into a room after the music has stopped and realizing you don't know what to do with your hands. But underneath that discomfort, something else slowly appeared: relief. Not happiness, not pride, just relief. I started reaching out. Not to argue, not to justify my choices, just to acknowledge what had happened. Some people never replied. Some told me they needed distance. Some were kinder than I deserved. I accepted all of it. Repair doesn't mean undoing damage, it means facing it without excuses. A few weeks later, I went to my grandmother's apartment. I brought flowers. My hands shook when I rang the bell. She opened the door slowly, looked at me for a long moment, then pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. She let me in. That was enough. I'm rebuilding now, carefully, without rushing. I've learned to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it, to listen instead of defending, to accept that some losses are permanent. I don't feel untouchable anymore, but I feel grounded, and I finally understand something I didn't before. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want without limits, it's knowing what your choices cost and deciding whether you're willing to pay that price.